60 passengers watched the black woman being removed from first class, but none of them knew the badge inside her wallet could change everything. Dr. Renee Whitaker stood beside seat 1C beneath the cold cabin lights, her brown gold jacket folded neatly over one arm while Sergeant Thomas Callahan blocked the aisle in front of her. Lead flight attendant Lauren Hayes held Renee's boarding pass as though it belonged to someone else. Around them, heads turned, whispers rose, and several telephones quietly appeared above the seat backs. "Walk off now," Callahan said, "or we escort you." Renee looked at him without raising her voice. "You have checked my face more carefully than you checked my ticket." The cabin went still. Officer Michael Grant, standing behind Callahan, glanced toward Lauren's tablet. A yellow synchronization notice glowed beside seat 1C, but the reservation had not been cancelled. Lauren had seen the alert, looked at Renee, and decided the problem was the passenger instead of the system. Stay with this story and subscribe, because the truth waiting inside Renee's wallet was not the only fact these people had ignored. Callahan extended one hand toward the front door. "Ma'am, you need to leave the aircraft." Renee placed her tablet into her small carry-on bag. Her movements were controlled, almost deliberate enough to make the passengers uncomfortable. They expected anger. She gave them precision. "Before I move," she said, "verify the passenger name, the confirmation code, and the seat history." Lauren's expression tightened. "We have already explained this. The system does not recognize you for this cabin." Renee pointed toward the pass in Lauren's hand. "It recognized me at the gate. The seat may have been reassigned." "Then show me the reassignment." Callahan stepped closer. "This is not a negotiation." "No," Renee replied. "It is a verification." Across the aisle, 11-year-old Emma Collins watched from beside her mother. 10 minutes earlier, Renee had helped an elderly passenger lift a coat into the overhead compartment. She had returned to her seat, fastened her belt, and opened a report on her tablet. Nothing about her behavior had disturbed anyone until Lauren questioned whether she belonged in first class. Emma leaned toward her mother. She showed them her ticket. Her mother whispered for her to remain quiet. Lauren heard the child and looked away. Grant moved closer to the tablet. "May I see the reservation history?" he asked. Callahan did not turn. "We can review it after she is off the plane." "If the ticket is valid, why remove her first?" Grant asked. The question changed the air. Callahan's shoulders stiffened. He had entered the cabin after receiving a report about a non-compliant passenger refusing to leave first class. The label had reached him before the evidence, and now every comm request from Renee sounded like resistance. "The crew requested assistance," he said. "We are completing that request." Renee picked up her bag and stepped into the aisle. "I am following your instruction," she said. "I am not agreeing with your accusation." A passenger near the window lowered his telephone slightly. Another stared at the carpet. Lauren handed the boarding pass to Callahan, but Grant caught a detail on the screen. The confirmation number beside Renee's name was still active. Seat 1C had never been released. "Sergeant," he said, "the reservation is valid." Callahan looked at the watching passengers, then at Renee. For one brief second, he could have stopped everything. Instead, he pointed toward the open aircraft door. "We will finish this outside." Renee walked forward beneath 60 silent stares, knowing the mistake was no longer hidden inside a computer. It had become a choice. 3 hours earlier, Renee Whitaker had entered the airport without an escort, a government vehicle, or any visible sign that she held authority over national aviation standards. She wore a tailored brown gold jacket over a dark blouse, carried one compact suitcase, and moved through the terminal with the quiet focus of a traveler who preferred observation to attention. Her destination was Washington, where she was scheduled to present a report about passenger conflict, verification failures, and the damage caused when employees allowed assumptions to replace evidence. The irony had not yet revealed itself. Renee passed through security with ordinary travelers, waited in the same crowded gate area, and never opened the wallet containing her federal identification. She did not believe dignity should depend on a badge. At the counter, the gate agent scanned her boarding pass and confirmed seat 1C. A brief yellow notice appeared on the computer, then disappeared before the agent waved her forward. Renee noticed the hesitation. Is there a problem with the reservation? She asked. The agent checked the screen again. No, ma'am. You are confirmed. Renee thanked her and continued down the jet bridge. Inside the aircraft, she placed her suitcase in the overhead compartment and settled into the first-class seat beside the aisle. An elderly passenger across from her struggled with a heavy coat, so Renee stood and helped place it above his seat. 11-year-old Emma Collins watched from the next row. Thank you, the man said. Renee smiled. Of course. She returned to 1C, fastened her seat belt, and opened a safety report on her tablet. Several minutes later, Lauren Hayes entered the cabin holding a passenger manifest. The yellow synchronization notice had returned beside seat 1C, temporarily showing another traveler's name before switching back to Renee's reservation. Lauren looked at the screen, then at Renee's simple luggage and understated clothing. May I see your boarding pass? She asked. Renee displayed it immediately. Her full name, confirmation code, and seat assignment were clearly visible. Lauren barely studied the screen. There may be a problem. This seat appears to belong to another passenger. The gate agent confirmed it, Renee replied. You can compare the confirmation code with the reservation history. Lauren's expression cooled. I need you to wait near the front while we resolve this. Renee remained seated. I will move if the seat was reassigned. Please verify that first. I am giving you a crew instruction. And I am asking whether the instruction is based on confirmed information. The exchange remained quiet, but Lauren glanced toward the passengers who had begun listening. What should have been a simple data check became a test of authority. Lauren stepped into the galley and spoke into the interphone. She described Renee as a passenger refusing to leave first class. She did not mention the valid boarding pass. She did not mention the yellow system notice. She did not say that Renee had offered her confirmation code. The phrase non-compliant passenger entered the record before anyone confirmed what Renee had actually refused to do. When Sergeant Thomas Callahan received the call, he heard that a woman was occupying a first-class seat that did not belong to her and challenging the crew. By the time he stepped onto the aircraft with Officer Michael Grant, he was not looking for a reservation error. He was looking for a problem. Renee watched him approach through the narrow aisle and understood that the computer had made the first mistake, but people were about to decide whether it became something worse. Callahan reached seat 1C with the certainty of a man who believed the difficult part had already been decided. Lauren stood beside him holding Renee's boarding pass, while Officer Michael Grant remained half a step behind, studying the passenger manifest on her tablet. Ma'am, stand up and bring your belongings, Callahan said. Renee looked from his face to the pass in Lauren's hand. Has anyone checked the confirmation code? The crew has requested your removal. That does not answer my question. Callahan's expression tightened. You are refusing a direct instruction. Renee unfastened her seatbelt and rose immediately. I am standing, Sergeant. I am also asking you to verify the accusation. Grant glanced at the screen. The yellow notice beside seat 1C showed a temporary synchronization conflict, but Renee's reservation remained active. Sergeant, the record is still processing, he said. Callahan kept his attention on Renee. We can sort it out at the gate. You can sort it out here, Renee replied. The passenger name, confirmation number, and seat history are already available. Lauren folded her arms. She has been arguing since boarding. Renee turned toward her. I showed you a valid pass. I offered the confirmation code. You changed a request for verification into an argument. Several passengers lowered their eyes. Others held telephones above the seat backs. Emma Collins watched from the next row, her safety card resting in her lap. She did what you asked, the girl said quietly. Her mother touched her shoulder, but the words had already reached the aisle. Lauren looked toward Emma. Please remain seated. Grant enlarged the reservation details. The screen displayed Renee's name, payment confirmation, first-class fare, and seat 1C. No cancellation appeared. No completed reassignment existed. Her ticket is valid, he said. Callahan finally turned. The crew still wants her off the aircraft. The original reason was the seat, Grant replied. That reason is not supported by the record. The cabin became so quiet that Renee could hear the ventilation above her and the faint click of someone locking a suitcase compartment. Callahan looked at the passengers watching him. Stopping would require him to admit that the label he had trusted was wrong. Continuing would turn a correctable mistake into a public choice. Renee saw the decision forming behind his eyes. "Sergeant," she said, "authority is not weakened by checking the facts. You do not decide how I conduct this response." "No. The evidence should." Lauren stepped closer. "Even if the seat is valid, she has disrupted boarding by refusing to cooperate." Grant looked at her. "She stood up when instructed. After questioning me repeatedly." Renee picked up her compact suitcase from beneath the seat. "Questions do not become misconduct because the answers are inconvenient." Callahan extended his hand toward the front of the cabin. "Walk." Renee stepped into the aisle. She did not raise her voice, demand a supervisor, or mention the federal credential inside her wallet. She moved past the first row while 60 passengers watched, some curious, some uncomfortable, and some relieved that the attention was not directed at them. Emma stood halfway from her seat. "She helped that man with his coat," she said. She was not bothering anyone. Renee paused beside her and offered a calm smile. "Stay with your mother." Callahan gestured again. Renee continued toward the aircraft door. Grant followed, still holding the tablet. At the threshold, he refreshed the reservation history one final time. A new line appeared, showing that the temporary seat conflict had been generated by a fleet change update and automatically corrected before boarding. Seat 1C had belonged to Renee from the beginning. Grant turned the screen toward Callahan. There was never a reassignment. Callahan looked at the proof, then at Renee standing beneath the white lights of the jet bridge. The misunderstanding was over. What happened next would reveal whether truth mattered more to him than finishing the order. Callahan stared at the updated reservation history while the jet bridge hummed around them. Renee stood several feet away beneath the white overhead lights, one hand resting on the handle of her suitcase, her posture composed despite the humiliation she had just endured. Grant held the tablet between them, the corrected record impossible to ignore. Seat 1C had never been reassigned. The system error had resolved before boarding. The boarding pass had been valid from the beginning. "Sergeant," Grant said quietly, "we should return her to the aircraft and correct the report." Callahan looked through the open doorway at the passengers still watching from first class. Lauren stood just inside the cabin with her arms folded, waiting for him to protect the decision she had already made. Renee recognized the pressure in his face. The facts had changed, but the audience had not. "You have what you need," Renee said. "The accusation was wrong." Callahan shifted his jaw. "The crew still reported that you were disruptive. The crew changed the accusation after the ticket was verified." Lauren stepped into the jet bridge. "She refused to move when I first instructed her." Renee turned toward her. "You instructed me to surrender a confirmed seat before checking whether your information was accurate. You challenged me in front of other passengers. I asked you to verify a record." Grant looked at Callahan. Her body language remained calm. She stood when ordered. She walked off the aircraft without resistance. Callahan's hand moved toward his radio, then stopped. He could still end the situation properly. He could acknowledge the error, return Renee to seat 1C, and correct the record before the aircraft door closed. Instead, he looked at the raised telephones inside the cabin and heard the unspoken question behind every camera. Would he reverse himself in public? "We are completing the incident report first," he said. Grant's expression changed. "On what basis?" "Failure to follow crew instructions promptly." Renee studied Callahan for a long moment. "You are no longer investigating what happened." Her voice remained soft. "You are searching for a reason to justify what you already did." The words landed harder than anger because everyone on the jet bridge knew they were true. Lauren looked away. Grant lowered the tablet slightly. Callahan stepped closer to the gate counter and held out his hand. "Identification." Renee did not reach for her wallet immediately. "My identity does not change the validity of the ticket. I need identification for the report. Then document that you asked after the original claim collapsed." Callahan's face tightened. Ma'am, provide identification. Renee opened her leather wallet. Her fingers passed over a driver's license, 2 credit cards, and a federal credential she had not intended to use. She removed the driver's license first and handed it to him. Callahan read the name aloud. Renee Whitaker. Grant entered it into the report system. A government contact notice appeared beside her profile, requiring additional verification before any detention or removal record could be finalized. Grant frowned and looked at Renee. Do you have federal identification? Lauren's attention sharpened. Callahan glanced at the screen. What agency? Renee opened the wallet again and removed a dark blue credential holder. She placed it on the counter without ceremony. You asked me to verify who I am, she said. I asked you to verify the ticket. Callahan opened the holder. The gold seal caught the white terminal light. Beneath Renee's photograph were the words Federal Aviation Administration and Senior Director for Operational Standards. Grant read the title twice. Lauren's face lost its color. Callahan looked from the badge to the woman standing before him, then back toward the aircraft where 60 passengers had watched him remove her from a seat that had always been hers. The jet bridge fell silent. Renee did not smile. The badge does not make me right, she said. The record already did. For several seconds, nobody moved. The federal credential remained open on the counter, its gold seal reflecting beneath the terminal lights, while Callahan stared at the title he could no longer dismiss. Grant was the first to speak. Sergeant, we need a supervisor and the captain. Callahan did not answer. Lauren stepped closer, lowering her voice as if quietness could reduce what had happened. There was a system conflict. We were trying to protect the boarding process. Renee looked at her. The system conflict was corrected before I entered the aircraft. Lauren pressed her lips together. You still refused my instruction. I asked for verification, and you reported that request as misconduct. Grant turned the tablet toward Callahan again. The record now displayed every step in order. Renee had checked in on time. Her boarding pass had scanned successfully. Her first-class seat had remained confirmed. The temporary synchronization notice had cleared. Lauren had not completed the available verification process before contacting security. Callahan had then been informed that the ticket was valid and had continued the removal anyway. The facts appeared in plain language, stripped of tone, pride, and assumption. Callahan slowly closed the credential holder and returned it to Renee. Dr. Whitaker, there has clearly been a misunderstanding. Renee accepted the badge but did not place it back into her wallet. A misunderstanding ends when the facts become clear. You continued after Officer Grant showed you the facts. Callahan glanced at Grant, then toward the cabin. We can return you to your seat. And what happens to the report calling me disruptive? Renee asked. We will correct it. What happens to the crew record stating that I refused to cooperate? Lauren shifted her weight. We can amend the language. Renee held Callahan's gaze. You changed the reason. For removing me when the first reason failed. That needs more than an amended word. Captain Sarah Mitchell appeared at the aircraft door, summoned by Grant through a quiet message. She carried the controlled urgency of someone responsible for every person on the plane. What is the status? Grant explained the reservation error, the valid ticket, and the federal identification in careful detail. Captain Mitchell listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked at Renee. Recognition entered her expression. Dr. Whitaker, we met at the National Operations Briefing in Washington last fall. Renee nodded once. Lauren looked between them. Callahan's face tightened further, but Renee showed no satisfaction. The captain turned to Lauren. Did you verify the reservation history before requesting police assistance? Lauren hesitated. The cabin was becoming delayed. That was not my question. No, Captain Mitchell looked at Callahan. Were you informed that the reservation was valid before she was removed from the aircraft? Grant answered before Callahan could. Yes, Captain. The ventilation system whispered above them. Beyond the glass wall, ground crews moved beneath the afternoon sun, unaware that a simple seat error had exposed something far larger. Captain Mitchell ordered the aircraft door to remain open and requested that all relevant records be preserved, including gate scans, reservation logs, radio communications, and body camera footage. Lauren's shoulders lowered. Callahan removed his hand from the radio as though the device had suddenly become too heavy. Renee looked through the doorway and saw Emma watching from her seat. The girl raised one hand slightly. Renee returned the gesture. Then she faced the three officials before her. "I will not return to that seat until the record states what actually happened." Callahan's voice was quieter now. "And what would you like it to state?" Renee answered without anger. "That my ticket was valid, that I cooperated, and that authority chose not to listen until it saw a title it respected." Captain Mitchell asked the gate supervisor to bring a printed incident form, then moved everyone away from the aircraft door so boarding could remain paused without turning the jet bridge into a public spectacle. Renee stood beside the glass wall, her suitcase upright at her side, while the afternoon light stretched across the floor in pale bands. Inside the cabin, passengers whispered behind closed mouths. Outside, baggage carts rolled beneath the wing with steady mechanical rhythm. The world continued moving as though nothing important had happened. Grant reviewed the body camera timeline and read each entry aloud. Lauren had reported that Renee occupied an unauthorized seat. The boarding record showed the opposite. Lauren had described her as uncooperative. The footage showed Renee standing when ordered, speaking evenly, and requesting verification. Callahan had been shown the valid reservation before directing her into the jet bridge. Each fact removed another excuse. Captain Mitchell looked at Callahan. "Do you dispute the recording?" "No," his answer came slowly. "Do you dispute the reservation history?" "No." "Then the report will not describe this as a mutual misunderstanding." Callahan lowered his eyes toward the floor. Renee watched him without triumph. She knew humiliation could harden a person as easily as it could awaken one. The purpose was not to make him feel small. The purpose was to make the truth impossible to escape. Lauren stood with her hands clasped near her waist. "I thought she was refusing to follow procedure." Renee turned toward her. "Procedure would have required you to verify the seat before calling security." Lauren swallowed. "I made an assumption." "Yes," Renee said. "Then everyone after you treated that assumption as evidence." The sentence settled into the quiet space between them. Grant stopped typing. Captain Mitchell looked through the aircraft doorway toward the waiting passengers, then back at Renee. "Dr. Whitaker, the seat is available, and the crew can be changed before departure. You may continue to Washington if you choose." Renee looked at the open cabin. Seat 1C remained exactly where she had left it, but the space no longer felt simple. Returning would prove she could not be pushed out. Leaving would protect her. Peace. Neither choice could erase what had already happened. "I will take the flight," she said, "but not because of the badge." Captain Mitchell nodded. "Understood." Renee stepped closer to the counter and placed her boarding pass beside the federal credential. One was a small paper rectangle that should have been enough. The other carried a title that had forced people to pay attention. Callahan stared at the two objects together. "I should have stopped when Officer Grant confirmed the seat," he said. Renee studied his face. The hardness had faded, leaving something more difficult to look at. Recognition. "You should have checked before you came aboard," she replied. "But yes, you had another chance after that." He nodded once. "I was focused on maintaining control." "Control of what?" Renee asked. Callahan glanced toward the passengers. "The situation." "No," she said. "You were trying to control how the situation made you look." He did not defend himself. Lauren's eyes filled with shame, but Renee offered no easy comfort. Kindness did not require pretending that harm had not occurred. It required refusing to become cruel while insisting on accountability. Captain Mitchell signed the corrected report and handed it to Grant for digital entry. The new language stated that Renee's reservation had remained valid, that she had complied with police instructions, and that removal proceedings continued after verification was available. Callahan read the statement before adding his name. His hand paused above the signature line. Then he signed. Through the aircraft window, Emma placed her palm against the glass. Renee raised her own hand in answer. For a moment, the noise of radios, engines, and rolling luggage seemed to fade. The child smiled, not because a powerful official had won, but because the woman who had been treated unfairly had remained standing without surrendering her dignity. Renee picked up her suitcase. As she walked back toward the cabin, Callahan remained beside the counter, looking at the boarding pass that had told the truth long before anyone respected it. When Renee returned to seat 1C, the cabin did not greet her with applause. She was grateful for that. Applause would have turned her humiliation into entertainment, another moment for strangers to consume before returning to their own lives. Instead, the passengers made room for silence. Some lowered their telephones. Others avoided her eyes. Emma watched Renee place her suitcase beneath the seat, then leaned across the aisle. "Are you all right?" she asked. Renee fastened her seatbelt and offered the child a gentle smile. "I will be." Captain Mitchell entered the cabin and announced a short operational delay without identifying Renee or describing the incident. Lauren had been removed from the working crew pending review, and another lead flight attendant had taken her place. The replacement approached Renee quietly. "Your seat has been confirmed, Dr. Whitaker. May I bring you anything before departure?" Renee looked at the boarding pass resting on her tablet. "Water, please." The woman nodded and walked away. No special treatment. No public apology designed to protect the airline. Just the ordinary service Renee should have received from the beginning. Outside the aircraft, Callahan remained with Grant near the gate counter. The corrected report had exposed the first layer of truth, but Grant knew the official record was still incomplete. He opened the body camera file and returned to the moment when he had shown Callahan the active reservation. The audio was clear. "Her ticket is valid." Callahan had paused, looked toward the passengers, and ordered Renee off the aircraft anyway. Grant replayed the moment once, then saved it as a separate evidence marker. "You knew before she crossed the doorway," he said. Callahan did not deny it. "I thought reversing the decision would create more confusion. For the passengers, or for you?" Callahan looked through the glass wall toward the plane. "For me." The admission came without defense. Grant then opened Lauren's original radio call. She had reported that Renee refused to surrender a seat belonging to another passenger. Gate records showed that no other passenger had ever been assigned to 1C after the aircraft change. The system notice had been temporary, visible for less than 1 minute, and automatically corrected before Renee boarded. Lauren had not misunderstood a confirmed reassignment. She had seen an unresolved alert and filled the missing information with an assumption. Callahan had accepted her assumption as fact because it matched the story he expected to find. Inside the cabin, the aircraft began moving away from the gate. Renee watched the terminal slide past the window while the engines deepened into a steady roar. Her federal badge remained closed inside her wallet. The badge had changed the behavior of everyone around her, but it had not changed a single fact. Her ticket had been valid before they knew her title. Her voice had been calm before they recognized her authority. Her dignity had existed before anyone decided to respect it. 2 hours later, as the aircraft approached Washington, Captain Mitchell brought Renee a secure message from the airline's chief operating officer. It offered a private apology, immediate compensation, and unrestricted first-class travel for future flights. Renee read it once and handed the tablet back. "Tell them I am not interested in being rewarded for proving I belonged in a seat I purchased." "What do you want them to do?" the captain asked. Renee looked toward Emma, now sleeping beside her mother. "Preserve every recording. Publish the corrected procedure. Define noncompliance by conduct, not by discomfort. And make sure the next passenger does not need a federal badge before anyone checks the truth." Captain Mitchell nodded. On the ground in Atlanta, Callahan received notice that he had been removed from passenger response duty pending review. He read the message beneath the same white lights where Renee had stood. For the first time, he understood that the most damaging evidence was not the badge he had failed to recognize. It was the moment he had recognized the truth and chosen not to stop. The airline's executive team contacted Renee the following morning before her meeting in Washington. They offered a private conference, a written apology, travel credits, and a public statement describing the incident as an unfortunate service failure. Renee listened without interrupting. When the legal Representative finished, she placed the printed proposal on the table. You are offering benefits to the person whose title made this embarrassing, she said. What are you changing for the passenger who does not have my title? The room fell quiet. Captain Mitchell sat beside the airline's operations director, while a representative from airport security joined through a secure video call. Renee opened the preserved records one by one. The boarding skin had been valid. The temporary seat alert had corrected itself. Lauren had skipped the full verification process. Callahan had received proof and continued the removal. Every failure had been small enough for someone to excuse alone, but together they formed a pattern that could not be dismissed as confusion. Renee asked for 5 changes. First, employees would be required to review the complete reservation history before labeling any passenger unauthorized. Second, the phrase non-compliant passenger could not be entered without a description of specific conduct. Third, police officers responding to seat disputes would verify available records before directing removal. Fourth, body camera and gate data would be preserved automatically whenever a passenger challenged an identity or seating decision. Fifth, the incident would be used in training without hiding the choices made by staff. The legal representative shifted in his chair. Some of those changes could create operational delays. Renee looked toward him. Verification takes less time than repairing public harm. The operations director nodded slowly. We can implement a pilot program in Atlanta. Not a pilot, Renee replied. A policy. Lauren attended the review through another video connection. Her voice trembled when she spoke. Dr. Whitaker, I am sorry. Renee waited. Lauren took a breath. I saw the alert, looked at you, and assumed the system was right even when the boarding pass said otherwise. When you questioned me, I felt challenged. I used security to protect my authority. Renee's expression softened, but her answer remained firm. I accept that you are telling the truth now. Accountability begins there. It does not end there. Callahan spoke next from a plane conference room at the airport police office. His uniform badge had been removed during the internal review. I was told the passenger was refusing to cooperate, he said. Then Officer Grant showed me the valid record. I knew the reason for removal had failed, but I continued because I did not want to reverse myself in front of the cabin. Renee met his eyes through the screen. That was the moment the mistake became a decision. Yes, he said. It was. He did not ask for forgiveness. He requested permission for the body camera footage to be used in future officer training, with his name and actions included. Renee considered the request. Only if the lesson is not that you should have respected an official, she said. The lesson is that you should have respected a passenger. Callahan nodded. Understood. The airline approved the policy changes that afternoon. Lauren was removed from lead duties while completing retraining and supervised service. Callahan accepted reassignment from passenger response operations and began assisting with a new verification program. Grant received formal recognition, not for discovering Renee's title, but for continuing to question an unsupported order. Before leaving the conference room, the operations director asked Renee whether she still wanted the travel credits. She closed the folder and stood. Use them for passengers who miss flights because your employees make mistakes, she said. Her answer was not revenge. It was a boundary shaped into reform. The people who had failed her were not destroyed, but neither were they protected from consequence. Their apology became meaningful only when it changed what they would do the next time power met uncertainty. 6 months later, morning sunlight poured through the glass walls of the Atlanta terminal, warming the polished floor where Renee had once stood beneath cold white lights with her dignity placed on trial. She moved through the concourse with the same compact suitcase and the same quiet confidence, wearing her brown gold jacket over a dark blouse. Her federal credential remained inside her wallet. She had not needed to show it once. Near the first-class boarding lane, an older black woman named Gloria Bennett handed her pass to a new gate agent. A warning appeared on the screen, showing that her seat was also assigned to another passenger after an aircraft change. Gloria's shoulders tightened when the agent asked her to step aside. Renee slowed but did not interfere. The agent opened the full reservation history, compared both confirmation numbers, and called a supervisor before making any accusation. Within 2 minutes, they discovered that Gloria's original seat had remained valid while the second assignment belonged to an outdated seating map. "Mrs. Bennett, this was our error," the agent said. "Your seat is confirmed. I apologize for the confusion." No police were called. No one described her as difficult. No crowd gathered to watch her prove that she belonged. Gloria thanked the agent and continued toward the aircraft, never knowing how many painful choices had helped create that ordinary moment of fairness. Across the concourse, a training room stood behind a glass wall. Callahan was inside, wearing a simple navy suit instead of his former field uniform. A paused image from his body camera appeared on the screen behind him. It showed Renee standing calmly in the jet bridge while he held evidence that her ticket was valid. Callahan faced a group of new officers. "This is the moment I should have stopped," he said. "The mistake began before I arrived, but I made it worse when protecting my authority became more important than correcting the record." He explained that compliance did not mean silence, questions did not equal aggression, and a uniform did not turn an assumption into proof. Grant stood near the back of the room, now helping oversee the airport's verification training. Lauren had returned to service under supervision and was teaching new crew members how to describe conduct with facts instead of labels. None of them had escaped consequence, but consequence had been given a purpose. Renee stopped outside the classroom. Callahan noticed her through the glass. For a moment, neither moved. Then he placed one hand over his heart and gave a restrained nod. Renee returned the nod, not as permission to forget, but as recognition that he had chosen to remember. She continued toward her gate. Behind her, Callahan told the officers, "Authority is not weakened when it pauses. It becomes honorable when it is willing to discover that it was wrong." Renee reached the window as Gloria's aircraft pushed back from the gate. The morning light rested across the wing, and the terminal carried its usual sounds of rolling luggage, distant announcements, and families saying goodbye. There was no ceremony for the passenger who had been treated correctly. That was the victory. Renee understood that kindness was not surrender, and accountability was not revenge. Real justice appeared when the next stranger received respect without needing power, status, or a badge. As Renee boarded her own flight, one question remained for everyone who had watched the story unfold: when the evidence challenges your first assumption, will you protect your pride, or will you protect the truth?